Tribology Module 1 topic is types of sliding lubrication and methods of lubrication. So friction between two surfaces will be related to each other depends on number of factors such as applied load, relative velocity of surfaces, geometry of the surfaces, physical and chemical properties of the lubricant, as well as physical and chemical properties of the metal in contact. Depending upon these conditions, the following types of sliding friction exist. Sliding with fluid film lubrication. The conditions of operation of a flow lubrication in which the film of a liquid lubricant is so thick that the metal to metal contact between the moving parts is prevented. Only only the friction which occurs is within the fluid film, and this is called fluid film lubrication or perfect film lubrication. So when there are two surfaces which are completely separated by fluid film, so here there is no friction between the two surfaces, only friction which is between the fluid films. So this is called as a perfect film lubrication. As you can see in the figure, the fluid friction is considered less than metal to metal friction. Under this condition, the viscosity of the lubricant is the most important factor here, as we know, since it is determines the bearing friction, temperature rise, and rate of flow of lubrication through bearing load carrying capacity of the bearing. Therefore, the other physical properties and properties of lubrication are of secondary importance. So, the main thing is the viscosity. Next is boundary lubrication. Although fluid film lubrication is always preferred, it can exist only under the certain conditions, one of which is sufficient high relative velocity of the moving surfaces during the period of starting and stopping. When the relative velocity is very low, too low, oil film is not capable of forming then sufficient to support the entire load, and the bearing which normally operates fluid film lubrication is operated now with the film or boundary lubrication. Boundary lubrication exists also in journal bearing if the boundary of the bearing load becomes too high or if the viscosity of the oil is too low. The boundary conditions exist usually in simple or plain thrust bearings having parallel rubbing surfaces. The third is extreme boundary lubrications. The extent of which the observed film can prevent the metal contact is limited. Under certain load or temperature conditions, the boundary film will fail so that the direct contact will take place. This is called extreme boundary lubrications. Under these conditions, seizure of metallic surface of the disc and the destruction of one or the surfaces begins. It appears that the breakdown of the surface of the bearing unit usually it starts at tiny points called hotspots where the localized temperature rises to such a degree that welding of metal occurs. Sliding of clean surfaces. Lubricant may be supplied to the bearing intermittently or continuously. For continuous lubrication, a bearing may be lubricated within the limited supply of lubrication or with the abundant amount of lubrication. This method of lubrication that best suits particular bearing depends on number of factors such as the load on the bearing and position of the bearing axis. The most common systems for lubrications are hand oiling, wick feed, drop feed oilers, ring, chain or collar oilers, splash lubrication, feeding under pressure. Next is lubrication method. So lubrication methods include grease, oil lubrication is further classified according to the supply of method of lubricant. So grease lubrication, it permits most economical design of housing sealing devices. The most important factor in this lubrication method is that the grease must be selected suitable for the application and care taken to ensure the bearing is filled with the grease. High speed bearings require frequent lubrication for the relief. Excessive grease is considered to provide grease sectors or relief valves. Oil bath lubrication. This is the most common method suitable for low and moderate speed operations. In this lubrication method, it is important to control the quality of the oil in quantity of the oil. In normal applications, the oil level before a bearing is rotated should be approximately center in the lowest ball or in case of vertical shaft mounting on the at low speed operation, the oil level should only reach at 50 to 80% of submergence of the rolling element. On the other hand, drip or circulating lubrication mentioned below is recommended for high speed operation. Third one is splash lubrication. A device damper or bearing on a bearing shaft adjusted to the bearing must be used to pick up oil and convert it to mist or spray, which lubricates the bearing. This lubrication system is effective for operating at high operational high speeds. Fourth one, drip lubrication. This system is used when the bearing carries small or medium loads at ultra high speeds. The oiler is used to provide on the housing from which the oil drops on it. The running body inside the housing lubricates the bearing with spray or small quantity of oil is made to pass over through the bearing, and the rate of flow should be adjusted to a few drops per minute, and care must be taken that supply of oil maintained in the upper chamber. Circ- Circulating lubrication. Oil circulating lubrication is used for coiling bearings or for automatic concealed feeding to several. The features that are lubrication say that oil can be kept clean with a filter. In this method, it is necessary that oil should be completely drained after it passes through the bearing. For this purpose, special attention should be paid to the locating the oil outlet and inlet of opposite sides of the bearing to ensure positive circulation of the oil through the bearing to avoid excessive churning of the oil is carried upwards by the helical oil way on a rotating flange. Disc lubrication. This is effective for high speed operating. The disc is partially submerged in the oil, and the oil is carried upward to the upper reservoir by a centrifugal force and then the drain down on the bearing. This method of lubrication is used for such applications at superchargers or blowers. Oil mist lubrication. Oil must lubrication consists of a mixture of fine oil and particles or air transported at optimum pressure into the housing. This lubrication is very successful for high speed application because of lower bearing frictional torque due to less coefficient of friction of airborne mist. Jet lubrication. The use of oil jet lubrication has proven very satisfactory for high speed or high temperature applications where heat can be transmitted from outside source. The lubrication is accomplished by circulating cooled oil through the bearing in order to dissipate heat generated in the bearing. Usually, cold bearing oil is supplied under pressure to the bearing face by means of a nozzle. In some cases, oil holes are provided axially in the shaft radially in the inner ring, and oil is ejected from the hole into the bearing by a central force. At this at present, this system is used widely for main bearings for jet engines or gas turbines, as well as various kinds of high-speed operating equipments. This system has been adopted to practice for an value approximate to 210 to 4 mm per minute. So once again, so types of sliding bearing: sliding with fluid film. So fluid film is used by the metal contact. With the moving part is prevented, and only friction which is occurs is a fluid film So this type of is called as perfect film lubrication. Next is boundary lubrications. So in this, when the rate velocity is very low, oil film is not capable to support the load. Such types called boundary lubrications. Extreme boundary lubrications when the metal to metal contact takes place. This is called as extreme boundary lubrications. So lubrication method. So grease lubrication. So grease is with housing devices. So it is one important factor. So grease must be selected for application based on the application and the bearing is filled with the grease. Oil bath lubrication. So oil bath is very common method used for low speed operations. Then splash lubrications. A impel is used in bearing shaft to adjust to pick up the oil and convert it to extra spray, which lubricates the bearings. Drip lubrications. The system is used when the bearing carries small or medium loads at high speeds. Oil is brought to the housing from which oil drops on it. Circulating lubrications. The oil circulating lubrication is used for cooling, bearing, automated feeding, or several the the features that are lubricating was to keep clean the filter. Disc lubrication, it is effective and high speeds operating into the disc is partly submerged in oil and the carried upwards by help of central force and drained down on the bearing. Almost lubrications. Almost lubrication is a mixture of fine oil properties of air transported under the optimal conditions into the housing. This varies for high speeds of applications at very low frictional torque. Jet lubrications. The use of oil jet lubrication has proven very satisfactory. So it is used in high speed engines, turbines, etc.